stakeholder review and feedback on draft rule language regarding implementation of House Bill 1941 regarding cannabis producer cooperatives. This implementation affects WAC sections in Chapter 314 WAC, at this point including 314.55.01, 355.070, 314.55.075, and 314.55.0524. House Bill 1941 allows cannabis producers to form cooperatives or associations of up to 3 producer licensees per cooperative to process, handle, and market their products cooperatively, just as their producers of agricultural products do. CW 2434.010. House Bill 1941 also amends that RCW to designate cannabis as an agricultural product for the purposes of forming licensee cooperatives and associations. So I'll go ahead and share my screen again and get started. Thank you. As I mentioned, the purpose of this rulemaking is to look at the rulemaking for House Bill 1941. The purpose of this rulemaking is to share and receive feedback on draft rule concepts and rule language related to cannabis producer cooperatives. You can submit questions or comments in the chat today. For feedback or questions on this or other draft rules, you can contact us anytime at rules@lcb.wa.gov. Just a few housekeeping things. We have a few things to be aware of. This meeting is being recorded and the recording is subject to public disclosure. While we are in Teams, the chat feature today will be on, but any questions submitted in the chat will be saved in the rulemaking file, and they are also subject to public disclosure. Questions and comments in the session's team chat may not be responded to in real time, but will be addressed at the end of the session, time permitting. Participants today will be muted and will only be unmuted when the session's facilitator turns on the microphone. If you want to ask a question during the session, please use the raised hand function up in the top of the toolbar, and then we will get to you and unmute you to ask your question. Again, if you have questions that you'd rather submit in email, you can send it to us at rules@lcb.wa.gov. So, brief agenda today. We'll review 1941 briefly, take a look at the draft rule language, and in case you haven't noticed, there is a link in the chat today for the draft rule language we're working on for the CR 102 that we plan to file in October. So that link is available in the chat. We'll talk about next steps for our timeline for this project, and then I'm sure we'll have time at the end if there's any other questions. Okay, just a brief overview. House Bill 1941. You can find it easily on the legislature's website, and it provides information about the history of the bill and how it changed from when it was introduced. It's interesting. It was approved by the Washington State Legislature during the 2026 session. House Bill 1941 updated existing law in RCW 6950-325, which is the RCW concerning producer licenses for cannabis, and also updates RCW 2434.010, which is a RCW concerning agricultural cooperatives. This new law went into effect on June 11th, 2026, and LCB started out rulemaking by filing a pre-proposal statement of inquiry CR 101 on May 14th, 2026, as WSR 2611-024. House Bill 1941 allows licensed cannabis producers to form associations or cooperatives according to RCW 6950-325 and engage in cooperative activities as provided in RCW 2434-010, including processing cannabis under WAC 314-55-077, which is the rule section for cannabis processors. 1941 limits producer associations or cooperatives to representing no more than 3 producer licenses. That is in the dictated by the bill. 1941 designates cannabis as an agricultural product for the purposes of forming a producer association or cooperative. So in order to implement 1941 into our rules, of course, we start out by identifying the rule sections in our WAC, and then identifying how we can put this into the regulations so that we have a functioning cooperative program. So the first change that we identified, and I'm listing this WAC sections in these, is WAC 314-55-010, which is the definition section for cannabis rules. And the amendment that we would make, or we think it needs, is to add a definition for a producer cooperative, because there is already in LCB rules a definition for cooperatives that are oriented towards medical cannabis. So by adopting a definition of producer cooperative, which means a cannabis producer association or cooperative made up of not more than 3 cannabis producer licenses authorized under WAC 314-55-75. So that sets a definition for the chapter. Should be confusion about difference between medical and producer cooperatives. Next WAC section that is touched by this rulemaking is WAC 314-55-075. This is the WAC that regulates the producer licenses, and the changes to this WAC, other than updates, I believe the updates to the cannabis license amounts were done through expedited rulemaking already. So, so the changes to 075 begin. Again, I set off a definition here as subsection 12, cannabis producer cooperatives. For the purposes of this section, producer cooperative means an agricultural cooperative or agricultural association comprised of up to 3 cannabis producer or producer processor licensees engaged in cannabis production and processing activities collectively on their licensed premises as described and permitted in RCW 6950-325, subsection 1. And continuing, subsection A, no true party of interest may be associated with more than 3 producer or producer processor licenses, whether through cooperatives, ownership, or financial interest. Subsection B, cannabis processor licenses are not eligible to join a cooperative unless the processor licensee also holds or obtains a cannabis producer license in addition to the processor license. And I'll just take a moment here. First, if we have any questions or any anyone? I don't see anything so far. Okay. This is a question that came up because producers, by joining a cooperative, are able to do the activities of a processor, but it may be an unintended consequence of this bill, but producers can join together to do processing, but processors cannot join together or join a cooperative unless they also hold a producer license. So it's an intricacy that we have had questions about, but it's clear in the bill that wasn't put forth in the legislation. So I'll move on to 13. Okay, WAC 31455.075 subsection 13 also concerns the producer license, and it reads, members of a cooperative may collectively produce cannabis as they do now under this section. In addition, members of a cooperative may process cannabis just as licensees holding a cannabis processor's license are allowed to process cannabis under WAC 314.55.077. So that fits in with what I just mentioned, that the processor license activities are permitted when the producers join together in a cooperative. Excuse me. Okay. Section 314.55.075, subsection 14. I'll continue. Cannabis producer licensees seeking to form a cannabis producer cooperative must sign a mutual agreement before forming the cooperative. The members of the cooperative must also submit a copy of this agreement to the board before participating in any activities of the cooperative. Subsection A. Members of the cooperative must keep a copy of the mutual agreement on site at the licensed premises whenever activity of the cooperative is occurring. In subsection B, members of a cooperative must report to the board any changes to the membership of the cooperative, including the discontinuation of an established cooperative. Members of the cooperative must submit an updated copy of the cooperative's mutual agreement to the board prior to making a change to include a new member licensee in the cooperative. So this is pretty straightforward, I think. Just requires the LCB to have a copy of that agreement before any activities of the cooperative begin. Okay, I'll go on just a moment to 15. Okay, subsection 15. Members of a cooperative must maintain all laboratory test results of the cannabis plant material or concentrates produced or processed by the cooperative. And I do see there's a typo in the slide here. I apologize. So this requires that all members of the cooperative must have the lab test results for the material that they're handling, if there has been testing. Okay. And 16. Cooperative members must maintain transportation manifests for all cannabis material transported between the licensed facilities of cooperative members. Pretty straightforward. The activities of a cooperative must take place on the licensed premises, and just as with other material, there has to be the proper manifests for those transfers. And subsection 17. All participating licensees are jointly responsible for any violation or enforcement issues unless it can be demonstrated that the violation or enforcement issues were due to one or more licensee specific or conduct or action, in which case the violation or enforcement applies only to those identified licensees. So that's pretty straightforward that we're saying in rule that all members are responsible for the activities of the cooperative. Okay, and I think that we can move on to the last section that's identified in this rulemaking concerning violations. That's 314.55, 426. I'm sorry here. Here it is, 524. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, this is like 314.55, 524, and this WAC section is a table of penalties, and this amendment would add associations and co-ops. All participating licensees are jointly responsible for any violation or enforcement issues unless it can be demonstrated that the violation or enforcement issues were due to one or more licensee-specific conduct or action, in which case the violation or enforcement applies only to those identified licensees. And that kind of parrots the subsection 17 and 314.55.075. And okay. So that covers the draft changes that we have identified for this rulemaking. There obviously could be some refinement as we work on this and prepare for the proposed rule language and the filing of the CR 102. So in next steps for this rulemaking, we'll continue to work on this draft, and hopefully we'll receive feedback. We're always happy to hear what people think of the rules, but we also hope that they're accurate the first time around. So after today's session, we have a session on Friday, which is planned to be identical to this one, to go over the draft rule language and to get any feedback there is out there. We're planning to file the CR 102 for this project on October 7th, 2026 at the October board meeting. And when that is filed, the formal public comment period begins for the rulemaking. And because of the schedule of the code revisor's office and the schedule of the board meetings, we will not be able to have a public hearing on the coming proposed rules until on or after November 25th, 2026. That has to do with the code revisor's calendar. And if we have the public hearing in November or early December, we're looking at a CR 103 filing date, hopefully with permanent rules in January 2027 at the January board meeting. So that is all I have to present today, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments, or if not, I would encourage you to take a look at the survey that is in the chat. We're looking for anyone who would like to take the survey. regarding this session. And also, again, the draft of the rules we're working on is linked in the chat also. So I'll take a moment and shut up and see if anyone wants to raise their hand, if there's any comments or questions. Okay, well, it's an easy audience. So again, thank you for for attending today. If you'd like to see version 2 of this presentation, this will be presented again virtually on Friday at 10 o'clock. So I guess I can give you some time back today. And unless there's anything that anyone would like to bring up, I'll let you go. So thank you. And I look forward to the next session on Friday. Thank you.